So many students are struggling with this concept of using silence that I wanted to take a couple of minutes to explain some of my views. And basically in this couple of minutes, you're going to understand two different ways that you can demonstrate silence and a way for you to discern whether or not the silence is helpful. Okay, so first way of demonstrating silence is to just insert a pause, a long thoughtful pause before responding to something that the client says. I would recommend that you get into the mental habit of thinking 3 seconds, maybe 2. And you know how to count 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. That's the length of a good pause. So if the client comes to you or your friend, and you're practicing this in any venue that you can, the person says to you, I'm not really sure that my marriage is ever going to get better. Wait. Now, one thing that could happen is during that pause, they could offer some more information. The other thing that could happen is that pause gives you a chance to really absorb what they have said, which is so important because we have to be listening, and also gives you the chance to intentionally identify what skill you might want to use. For instance, you might just want to do a prompt or an encourager. Tell me more. Say more about that. You might want to do a paraphrase. You're really not sure that the marriage is going to make it. And the third thing might be a reflection of feeling. Wow, you seem really hopeless right now about that. 3 different possible responses, and there are probably 1,000 more. But you could think about what you want to do next. And that's the purpose of the pause, is to give you a chance and your client a chance to think. Remember, the ultimate purpose of any counseling session is to help the client to think. That's what all of these micro skills that you have learned up until now have been aiming for. Okay, the second way to use silence is to ask the client to take a minute before they respond to a question or a prompt. So you might say something like this: I don't want you to answer right away. I want you to stop and think before you answer. But I want to point out to you that every single time I've talked to you, you have said a different thing about your marriage. Some days it's positive and hopeful, and other days it's not. And it seems as though there's a fluctuation. No, before you say anything, think, stop. And then you wait. Now I'm going to tell you what you do while you're waiting. First of all, you're going to use your eyes, and that's part of what eye contact is about, is using your eyes to collect data about their nonverbals. And you learn so much. Fritz Perls said 98% of our communication is nonverbal, and that very little of the verbal communication is as telling as what we tell non-verbally. You can believe that or not. But what you're looking for are signs of a productive silence versus a non-productive silence. So here's what a productive silence looks like. Watch my nonverbals while I think. What I'm doing is thinking. You can tell because my eyes are shifting around. I'm accessing things I remember hearing when I look to either side towards my ears. I'm accessing things that I visualize or imagine or have seen when I look up. I'm feeling or sensing things in my body, but those are all ways that we send signals that we're thinking. When a client or another person in a conversation is experiencing an awkward silence, which is the one you want to avoid, they will keep darting their eyes back at you, hoping that you'll say something. And then they might take a breath as though they're going to say something, and they might just say something. Sometimes it's useful and sometimes not. So you don't want an unproductive silence to go on very long at all. That's your That's your signal to say something. And it could be this. Hang on a minute. I'm thinking that you didn't really understand maybe or hear the question. You might have been distracted, or maybe I didn't pose it clearly. Would you like me to say that question again? And they often will gratefully say, oh, yes, please. So here's what I want you to ask yourself. Is there some meaning to the fact that you keep shifting in the way that you feel about your marriage? Think. And that's a great way to use silence, is to actually ask your client to be silent for a minute. Either of those will work. So I hope that helps. Have a good week. Bye.